Hi y'all, I'm Lori. Thanks so much for stopping in. Today I wanted to talk to you about a few things you could do when you're invited out on a boat to ensure that you're a great guest and that you get invited back. So let's get to it. Now, the very first thing you can do to ensure that you're going to be a fantastic guest on the boat and get invited back starts before you ever even get to the boat. And that is by simply reaching out to your host, whoever invited you, and asking them, hey, what can I bring? Now, the reason this one is so important is because when you're hosting friends and family on your boat, you want to have as many people as possible, but you don't want to be crowded. You want everybody to have everything they need to be comfortable, but you don't want to be overwhelmed with things. And the boat is like tiny home living. Space's limit is just not as vast as it is in a house on land because there's no land. And that means your host has to be very aware of what is going to be on board and how that space is going to be used to ensure that everybody's going to be safe, comfortable, and have a good time while they're on the boat. Now, it is totally okay to show up with things like beer or a bottle of wine or maybe an appetizer to share, something like that. That is no problem. I'm sure your host is not going to have any problem with you bringing those kinds of things when you come to visit on the boat. But there's a couple of things you definitely do not want to bring without asking your host first. You certainly do not want to bring an ice chest without asking your host first. Ice chests take up a lot of space. I have no hard side ice chests on our boat, and I don't ever intend to have them on the boat because I don't need them. I have several refrigerators, and I have a freezer, I have an ice maker, we have everything we need already on the boat. If one of our guests unexpectedly shows up with an ice chest, then I've got to find a place to leave it on the dock before we go out for our day because there's just simply no room on the boat for an ice chest. So do not bring an ice chest or other big, clunky items that take up a bunch of space without talking to your host first because there's just probably not going to be room on the boat. Another really important thing that you do not want to bring on the boat without talking to your host first is extra people. We have a certain number of life jackets that we keep on the boat, and Coast Guard regulations require us to have a life jacket on board for every single person on board of the boat at any given time. And for us, that's a limited number, that's a finite number. So if somebody were to show up with 2, 3, 4 extra people, it's going to be a problem. Because if the guest list for the boat is already equal to the number of life jackets I have on the boat, then somebody has to tell your guest at the dock that they can't come. And that's going to be an awkward conversation your host certainly doesn't want to have, and your host doesn't want to put you in a position where you have to have that awkward conversation with that person that you brought with you either. Never bring unexpected guests with you when you come out for a boat trip. That's the most important one. Now, just important as not bringing that extra guest is to never arrive for a boat trip with an unexpected pet. The captain and I love fur babies. We love animals, but we do not allow animals on our boat at any time. It's a very black and white thing for us. If one of our guests were to show up to go out for the day with us on the boat with a fur baby, they have to leave. We simply are not equipped to ensure the safety of your pet, of your fur baby on our boat. And most people that we know with boats are not equipped to ensure the safety of your fur babies either. I know a lot of people have small lap dogs and they think they can hold on to their dog, and maybe they can, but the weather is unpredictable and the water is even more unpredictable. People sometimes have a hard time holding on to themselves on a boat, and a frightened animal can get away from you quick, and it's impossible to guarantee their safety on the boat. So for our boat, the captain and I absolutely do not allow any fur babies on our boat at any time. So never show up to go out for a day on the boat with a fur baby. We'd have to turn you away. And we don't want to make it awkward for anybody. Now that leads us to the next point, the next way to be a fantastic guest on the boat. And this point comes into play when you first get to the boat. Offer to remove your shoes before you step onto the boat. Always. Always offer to remove your shoes and come prepared to be barefoot on the boat. People are safer and generally more comfortable on the boat without their shoes on. The boat is simply difficult to clean from top to bottom. Boat owners that I know don't want dirt from the street tracked in on their boats. And also, a lot of shoes are not designed to be worn and safe on wet surfaces. And when you're underway, anything on the outside of the boat could potentially be a wet surface. The last thing we want you to do is slip and fall because you're wearing the wrong kinds of shoes. Some people honestly believe that deck shoes are the very best shoes to wear on a boat. And if you're one of those people, fine, cool, good for you. Wear your deck shoes, but not on my boat. Deck shoes are not the safest shoes to wear on a boat, and we'll get into that on a different video on a different day. Deck shoes are not going to give you safe footing on a boat 9 times out of 10. The safest way to walk around a boat is barefoot. Now, if you do have some kind of condition that requires you to wear your shoes, if you're just more comfortable and more stable in your shoes, simply tell your host before you come. For instance, I have a family member that has really bad arthritis in her feet, and her shoes are specially made to help her get around and work around that particular condition. I never ask her to take her shoes off on the boat. She's much more stable footed on the boat in her custom orthotic shoes. And so I would rather her keep those on, but that is a very specific special situation. 9 times out of 10, your host is going to want you to take those shoes off before you get on the boat. So when you get there and you get up to the boat, always ask the host if you should remove your shoes before you get on the boat. That'll help make it much more likely that you get invited back. Once you've got your shoes off and you're on the boat and you're getting ready to get underway, it is absolutely perfectly fine to offer to help with the fenders and the lines. But please do not get offended and step out of the way when your host asks that you not help. When we tell you we've got it, we've got it. And let me explain why. We are experts in our own boats. We're not experts in every boat, but we're experts in our own boats. And we know where our fenders need to be hung. We know at what point our fenders need to be brought up and stowed away. We know how our ropes need to be tied. We know how tight they need to be tied. And we know the right knots to use on an anchor cleat, for instance, to keep the boat steady. We don't, however, expect you to know all of those things. If your host does by chance take you up on your offer to drop a fender, stow a fender, or tie off a line, do not get your feelings hurt when they go behind you and check. And they want to make sure that all of these things are done in a way that's going to keep both the boat and all your guests on the boat completely comfortable and safe. That's the main goal, is so that everybody's safe and everybody's comfortable so you can get on to having a good time. Something else that is critical to you being a good guest on the boat and ensuring that you get invited back for another great day out on the boat is that you pick up after yourself. Boats are small spaces. Even larger boats are still small spaces. This is tiny home living at its best, in my opinion, but still tiny home living. If somebody is out with us for the day on a boat and they're leaving their beer bottles stacked up in a corner, it's going to be a problem because nothing really stays put on a boat unless it's been designed and specifically treated to stay put. If you're somebody who doesn't pick up after yourself as you go, then that space around you is going to get really cluttered and really crowded really quick. And nobody can relax in a really cluttered space with beer bottles rolling around and all hell breaking loose because there's just stuff everywhere it doesn't need to be. One of the most important things you can do for your host on a day out on the boat to ensure you get invited back is to pick up after yourself. We all appreciate that. And here's a bonus tip for you. If you are feeling extra generous at the end of the day, at the end of the boat trip, when you return back to the dock, offer to take the garbage with you. Garbage trash is a real challenge in a small space, or really in any space on the planet right now. Garbage trash is a big challenge for everything and anything on the planet. We are really committed to recycle and reuse wherever we can. That's why we use cloth napkins and real dinnerware on the boat as much as possible so that we can just wash and reuse the same items over and over and over. But we are human and we live in a world where waste does need to be disposed of. So if you're feeling super generous at the end of your day out on the boat, offer to take the garbage with you. Trust me, that is something your host is definitely going to remember, is absolutely going to appreciate. And they will certainly think of you when it's time to plan the next party out on the boat. As I often do, I have saved the very best tip for last. Let's get to that one now. Now, my very most important tip for you to be a great guest on the boat and ensure you get invited back is to understand that the captain of the boat is always the boss, and that you must always comply with any request the captain gives you without question. That's just the way it is. Or at least that's the way it is on our boat. Let me tell you why. The captain of the boat is ultimately responsible for everyone's safety on board. Sometimes people think a request from the captain is just that, a request. They think we're going to talk it through and figure out whether or not it applies to them and whether or not it's a valid request. Let me tell you, on the boat, a captain's request is simply a demand disguised as a request to try to be polite. When the captain asks for something to be done on the boat, it needs to be done a certain way. Let me tell you what some of those most important requests are on our boat, Zoe Grace. First of all, on Zoe Grace, when our boat is underway, it doesn't matter how slow we are going, no one is allowed to walk up and down the sides of the boat or out onto the swim platform. And the reason is because those are the most challenging parts of the boat to navigate, even when it's not underway. And when people come out onto the boat, chances are they don't live on a boat. They don't spend as much time on Zoe Grace like we do. And even though we've told them, they can easily forget that one hand is always for the boat and the other hand is for whatever else you have going on in your world. And what that means is if you're walking down the side of the boat, you always have a hold of a handrail on the boat. And under no circumstances can anyone be out on the swim platform when the boat is underway because the props turn right under there. If somebody were to jump off the back of the boat, or even worse, fall off the back of the boat, they could very easily get tangled up into those props. And that is almost immediately a life-threatening situation right now. And no one wants us to find ourselves in those situations. So rule number 1 for Zoe Grace is that there are no people walking up and down the sides of the boat or ever on the swim platform when the boat is underway. Under no circumstances. That's just the way it is, and it applies to everyone. Another situation that can arise on the boat is if the captain requests you to put on a life jacket on the boat, you put on a life jacket. We don't need to talk about it. We don't need to explain it to you and let you know why you need to do this. This is not a time where we're giving you the option to put on a life jacket or not put on a life jacket. Now, the way we handle it on Zoe Grace is whenever somebody comes onto the boat, we always offer them a life jacket. If you want to wear a life jacket 24/7 on the boat, I am all for that. I am not going to tell you no. I'm going to encourage you to do so. If you never want to wear a life jacket on Zoe Grace, then I don't have a problem with that unless I ask you to put one on. When you're asked to put a life jacket on the boat, you put it on with no question. You might be the greatest swimmer to have ever swam the ocean blue, but there is nobody who has ever swum across an ocean, and the water will always win. And if we ever find ourselves in a situation where there's any type of risk of people falling into the water or going into the water, we're absolutely going to ask that they put on a life jacket. And the request is only to be polite. We're really demanding that they put on a life jacket, and we expect it to be done without question. Put the life jacket on, nobody is ever sorry they did, but sometimes it's tragic if they don't. Now, the next request that the captain and I have on Zoe Grace is not life-threatening at all, but it is really, really important. And if you are invited out on a boat, then it's important for you to ask your host how to handle bathroom situations so that you do the right thing in the bathroom. Now, what this means on Zoe Grace is that we don't put any paper products into the septic system. That's right, no toilet paper, no paper products at all, ever. If you didn't eat it or drink it first, it cannot be flushed in our bathroom. We do have bidets and we do have appropriate cleanup materials, and I am happy to explain that to each and every single person that comes on the boat, because I understand for a lot of people, especially in North America where bidets are not as popular as they are in other places in the world, it can be confusing. It can be a little intimidating, and the last thing you want to do when you have to poop is be intimidated by your cleanup situation. But trust me, this no paper in the toilet thing does apply to you. It applies to me. It applies to all of us. And if you don't follow it, we will know. And you can bet it's going to be very difficult for us to decide to invite you back out on the boat if that one isn't followed, because that cleanup is not inexpensive, it is not pretty, and we do not look forward to doing it. That's why we are always super appreciative when people cooperate with the request to not put any paper products in the septic system at all, ever. And that brings us to our very last point that will help you be a great guest on a boat and ensure you get invited back. It's another bathroom issue. Nobody likes to talk about these, but we all do it. It's important to understand. And it's really super simple. It's this. If you sprinkle when you tinkle, be a sweetie and wipe the seatie. If you sprinkle when you tinkle, clean it up. Please do not leave it for me to clean later. I understand the boat is moving, and I can only imagine that it's not easy to take aim and keep accurate aim when the target is a constantly moving target, and when you're moving with the target. I get it. Nobody will know if you sit. Just have a seat, do your business, clean up, and go on with your life. You'll be more comfortable because you won't have any, sprinkle to be embarrassed of, and I will be way appreciative of it because I don't like cleaning it up. There, I said it. That's the real deal. I don't want to clean up the sprinkles, so please don't sprinkle when you tinkle. Now that's it. See how easy it can be to be a great guest out on the boat and ensure you get invited back? Now, a lot of these tips are very generic and apply to every boat I've ever been on, but clearly I don't speak for everybody's boat everywhere. I'm sure if you talk to 100 different boat captains, you would hear 100 different things that would make you the best guest possible on anybody's boat. These tips that I've shared with you today are pretty common among all the boat captains that we know, and they're definitely the things that we want our guests to know when they come out with us on Zoe right, Grace. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned a little bit. And the next time you're out on a boat, I hope you remember one of these 2 tips and take it with you when you go. Until I see you next time. Bye, y'all.